Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 37. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 7, Human American. So Bollisher is the kingdom, right? I asked. Yes, Renfus said. So what's the name of the city that we're going to? Yulk chuckled. It doesn't work that way with the Earls of this kingdom. The whole thing is Bollisher. If I remember right, it's a tradition that dates back to their founding. That's right, Renf said. The first High Dragon ruler of Bollisher was notably terrible at names. Instead of admitting to the fault, she had opted to name everything under her direct control Bollisher, after herself. Even when her kingdom expanded, the new territories were renamed Bollisher. None of the rulers of Bollisher bothered to rename anything, and now everything that is part of the kingdom is Bollisher is simply known as Bollisher. Maybe high dragons are just bad at naming things, I joked. Everyone chuckled. It goes a bit beyond that, though, Ren said. Not only is everything Bollisher, there are no borders within the kingdom. Everything functions like the big city. That explains why the fair folk like it so much, Nash muttered. Why? I asked. Because borders can be an issue with them, York explained. Sometimes the fae and fairy get trapped within the imaginary lines that we mortals insist upon. The more people believe in borders, the harder it is for them to cross. Bollisher is a good kingdom, so they have plenty of room to roam and grow. I kind of feel for the ones who get trapped in a forest. How did you have that forest get smaller and smaller as towns and cities grow around them? Nash said. It's usually the weakest of the fair folk that end up in that kind of situation too. What about Tartars and Algebron? I'm not sure, York scratched his chin. It could be that the road goes through their forest and as such is part of it, or maybe they're a type of the fae that isn't restricted by the power of borders. According to the maps that we have seen, the deep wild forest does not extend over the road that we traveled when we counted the fae. York's second hypothesis is likely correct, Ten said. Yeah, you're probably right, I said to York and Ten both. I sat back and watched our surroundings as we continued to the heart of Bollisher, where we would meet a high dragon. I wondered what it'll look like. Will it look like a dinosaur with wings like the dragons in European folklore? Or will it resemble a snake like the dragons of Asia? Or will it look like something else entirely? Will it wake up and talk to me? Or will something else happen while we're looking at the dragon? I've been trying not to think about my dream. The thing that told me to go see the dragon, whether it's good or not, gives me the creeps. It said that there's a bunch of other things like it watching me too. It's been hard not to think about that during the bathroom breaks. Suddenly, it occurred to me that I'd forgotten to tell Ten about my dream. I hadn't had a chance to tell Nash or York yet, but I don't have that excuse with Ten. Maybe I just sort of assumed it already knew, since it's in my head and everything. Creighton, do you know anything about gods? I asked. Gods and religions are not part of my knowledge base. Why? When I used all my magic and passed out, I had sort of a dream, except that it wasn't really a dream. It was more like my mind had been transported to somewhere else entirely. Something that said it was a god brought me here. It said that York's going to decline an invitation to see a high dragon, and I shouldn't let that happen. When I was out, did you notice anything weird about my brain? There was a notable pause before Ten finally said, I did not. It appeared to me as if you were simply unconscious. Were there any indications of a wild dream or something? No. The brain activity that I observed wasn't indicative of dreaming. Isn't that odd? Yes. But your dream may simply be a false memory that you obtained upon awakening, likely as a way to cope with the trauma that you had just experienced. If it is real, though, I would suggest a modicum of caution. We have little to no information about the gods and their intentions, and it would not be wise to do as they demand blindly. You're probably right, but I'm still going to convince York to see the high dragon. Really? Yeah. Call it a hunch, but I feel that it was telling the truth this time. And if I can't trust my feelings, then I'm probably too far gone to be resisting it now, right? Ten went silent instead of laughing at my somewhat dark humor. I allowed myself a small smile before I noticed that the trees around us were getting larger and larger. The trunks were also getting wider, so wide that it took an entire minute for us to pass one, and it wasn't long before the trees began to block the sun. "We're here," Imlar said as the cart stopped. I looked around and noticed that we had stopped at a building that had been carved into a tree. It had a sign with a coin on it hanging above its door, probably indicating that it was some sort of trader. Further down the road, there were many other similar buildings, all with lights adorning them. The visual was surreal. "All right, let's deliver our letter," Nash said, climbing out to the cart. Yulk, Renv, and I followed suit, and Imlar waved happily at us as we started to walk away. Yulk and Nash were examining signs as we walked. It was like they were looking for a specific one. We walked past one with a plate on it, and Ren's stomach growled. "You're still following us?" Nash asked the dwarf. "Well, once you conclude your business here, I was thinking I can take you to my uncle's shop to see about a reward for saving my hide," Renv grinned. "Plus, I'm curious to see what your lot get up to." "Do you know your way around?" "Nope, I've lived down south anyways, and haven't been up here in over a year. I'm pretty sure my uncle upgraded to a bigger building recently, but I've got no clue where it is." "That's okay," Yuk said. He pointed at a building with a sign depicting a pen and paper, attached to a large table with several harnesses. As we got closer, we could hear the ruckus from commerce taking place. Nash and Yuk entered the building first, and Renv held his hand out in a gesture indicating that I should go first. I did so, and the smell of fresh ink and paper hit me like a ton of bricks, nearly making my eyes water. Inside the buildings were bookcases behind a counter, several desks, and many elves and gnomes rushing around. Most of them were wearing a uniform, light tan shorts and a tunic with a green symbol of pen on their breast, and I assumed that they were employees of whatever business this is. Those that weren't in uniform weren't rushing around. They were waiting in line in front of the counter, or sitting in one of the desks with an employee. The customers, I assumed, would say something to the employee, then the employee would write. It took a few moments for me to realize that the customers were probably dictating letters or something. I glanced at Ash, remembering his illiteracy. He saw me glance at him and he looked around, then gave me a harsh glare. I looked away, trying not to smile. He grumbled something as we took our place in line. "What is this place?" I asked Yulk. "It's a mail office. They offer dictating services, reading services, delivery services, and since they know where everything is, they can give good directions," he explained, "which is why we're here." "Directions to the Regent?" "Correct. I haven't been here before, so I don't know where Regent Oakmar does his business." "I thought you'd been to Bolasar." "I have, but not this part of it. My business was with a certain sorcerer who built a tower in the forest, far away from any signs of civilization. She was much friendlier than you would expect from a hermit." "The sorcerer you're talking about wouldn't happen to be Almira the Eternal, would it?" Renv asked. "Yes, the very same. She told me how to use healing magic," Yulk said with a smile. "It seems like forever ago. How do you know her?" "Holomar's one of the healers I was talking about sharing your discovery with. She's one of Oakmar's advisors now. She'll probably be around here somewhere. I'll check when I ask for directions to my uncle." "How'd she end up as an advisor to the regent?" "She said it was because of the past. Turns out the tower in the wilderness occupied by just one person is a great place for bugs and rodents. One day she went into her cellar to find a nest of giant rats, and she lost it. Demolished the whole tower and then and there, and dug her savings out of the rubble and moved here. Didn't take long for Oakmar to offer her a job." "Why is she called the Eternal?" I asked as we moved closer to the front of the line. "She's a vampire," Yulk and Renv said simultaneously. They looked at each other and chuckled. "Oh, how does a vampire get blood when they're living as a hermit?" "Delivery services," Yulk said. "There are plenty of people willing to sell their blood, and the vampires who prefer not to injure people are more than happy to pay for it. Enchanted ice boxes keep the blood from rotting during transit." "There are services like that?" I asked incredulously. "Vampires just sort of order from a catalogue or what?" "I don't think the services offer specific blood types, but you'll find that such a service in nearly every territory. Sometimes they're even endorsed by the local government. It wouldn't do to have their vampiric citizens feeding on you other citizens." I had more questions, but the person ahead of us finished their business, and it was suddenly our turn at the counter. As we approached, I realized the bookcases had letters in them, and there were gnomes busy sorting those letters. A brunette elf smiled at us, and York stepped forward. "How can I help you today?" she asked. "We need directions to reach an Ogmar's place of business," York explained. "We have a delivery for him." She explained that all we had to do was follow the main road and look for a building with a sign that depicted a tree. The tree was apparently the symbol of Bolissa and marked government officers and officials. She was also kind enough to tell us that if we went further down the main road, we would find a sleeping dragon. She highly recommended taking a guided tour if we got the chance. "Thank you," York said, and stepped aside so Renv could have his turn at the counter. We waited for the dwarf to ascertain his uncle's location, and then left the post office. As we walked down the main road, I wondered how things were going to unfold. I assumed someone is going to invite us on a tour to see the dragon, and York is going to decline this invitation. I'm going to have to somehow convince him to accept the invitation. That's going to be hard, because I still haven't had a chance to be alone with my brothers and explain my dream to them. "There it is," Nash said, pointing at a building. Most of the buildings were within hollowed-out tree trunks. This one, though, looked like it was made of very old stone. It reminded me of the kind of stone you see a castle made out of in a fantasy movie. There were also plenty of people on the road, but none of them seemed at all interested in going in or out of the building. The doors were made of metal, iron probably, and swung open surprisingly easy as we entered. The first thing I noticed within the building was the distinct smell of stale paper, like the air within the building had been here for years and had been reading all the books. The room we had entered was smaller than I expected, and there were 8 doors. 3 on the walls to our left and right, and 2 on the wall behind the desk in the middle of the room. There were 2 people at the desk, a male and female elf. The female elf was sitting behind the desk with a serious expression on her face, and the male elf was standing off to the side reading some papers. York and Nash approached the desk, and I followed them with Renv trailing me. "Excuse me, we are here to deliver a missive from High Chief Ullamark to Regent Oakbar. Is he in?" York asked politely. "That would be me," the male elf said with a laugh. "What a coincidence. I was just reading up on the situation with the Night Kingdom. May I see the missive?" "Here you go, Your Highness." York passed the letter over. Regent Oakbar took the letter, opened it, and began to read. The woman sitting behind the desk watched the interaction, but was glancing at me every now and then. I smiled at her, and she froze for a moment, but smiled back and politely looked away. "As I suspected, strange happenings must be afoot for my blood brother to ask for reinforcements," Oakbar said after a moment. "You know, he once fought off into one of these invasions single-handedly. Meanwhile, make certain this missive gets to Field General Yom with the instruction that he take his soldiers to Ullamark's aid." "Yes, Your Majesty." Also, she trailed off and subtly pointed at me. Oh, the human!" Oakbar slid between York and Nash with a speed that would shock lightning. He grabbed my hand and vigorously shook it a few times before saying, "What a pleasure it is to have you visit this mighty kingdom of Bolissa. I've been simply dying of curiosity ever since I heard about the Orcs discovering you. Ullamark says they found you in a dungeon. Is that correct?" "Yes," I managed to say, despite my shock. "Nash found me, and York revived me." "Nash and York?" Oakbar asked. "That would be us, sire," Nash answered, gesturing to himself and York. "Truthfully, why, that sly papa managed to send me the whole set. Tell me, did the situation with the monster in the dungeon ever get resolved? Last I heard, Ullamark was sending over 20s. "It did, Your Highness," York said. "Nick is the one who killed it, actually." "Nick?" Oakbar inquired, with confusion before looking back at me. "Oh, yes, of course. You must be Nick, then." "Yes, sir," I said. "It is simply wonderful to meet you. Please accompany me to my office. I'd like to hear more about your adventures thus far." Nash and York glanced at each other and shrugged slightly. "It would be our pleasure, Your Highness," York said. End of chapter. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Dragzoon W.R.E, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, Jon Creighton, and Sevaren Serberous. Thank you very much.